Well, welcome to Tri-County Church. My name is Chris. I'm one of the pastors here, and I just want to extend a warm welcome to everyone watching online across all of our campuses. We're in the second week of the series titled ISO, Connected and Alone. And we all are living in a day and a time where we're the most connected ever. I mean, everywhere we go, we're connected somehow, from our cell phone, our mobile devices, computers, Wi-Fi. I mean, we're always connecting with people. And one of the things when I say, we're connected everywhere, and I don't know if this is just my issue. I might just have an issue with this, but maybe you have an issue with this too. We're even connected when we walk into public restrooms. Have you ever walked in a public restroom and someone's having a conversation on their phone? Isn't that weird, by the way? I mean, I know they're talking on the phone, but the restroom's kind of a private location. And I find myself standing there next to someone who's talking on the phone, and I kind of want to just go, hi, my name's Chris, welcome to the conversation, right? Like, it's just one of those things. Maybe it's just me. But the more connected we become, you know what they're all finding out? All the experts, and this is just not the United States, the more lonely people are becoming. That our connectivity and our loneliness are on the same trajectory. You see, you can be connected, but still completely isolated. You can be known. You can have hundreds and thousands of friends and followers on all the social media platforms, but still be all alone. And when we think about our relationships, there's some values that we attach to all of our relationships. And these values, they shape relationships, they guide relationships. These values are kind of fragile in nature. And when we think about these different values, there's three that I kind of want to highlight. There's more than that, but I think these three, all of us attach these values to every single relationship, no matter what type of relationship it is. The first value is this. The value is trust. Don't we attach trust to every relationship? Well, I mean, whether it's a dating relationship, a marriage relationship, a parent relationship, a boss relationship, a coach relationship, a teacher relationship, no matter the type of relationship, we attach trust. And one of my all-time favorite leadership books is this kind of classic old book. It shaped me as a leader. It was from an author, his name's John Maxwell, and the title of the book was 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And one of those 21 irrefutable laws was trust is a foundation of all leadership. And what is leadership? Leadership is people. At Tri-County Church, our definition for leadership is simply this, that leadership is gathering a team, a group of people to accomplish a defined purpose, a defined vision, a defined goal. But it's all about gathering a group of people too. And guess what? Trust is not just the foundation of leadership. It's a foundation of all relationships. And here's the thing about trust. To get trust, you have to give trust. To gain trust, I'm lightning fast. And my heart rate is like, I'm not even sure how I grabbed it. I didn't see it. Did you see that? If egg dropping was an Olympic sport, I'd get gold. Woo! But to gain trust, sorry, I need to take a moment right now. And we got that on video. Awesome, right? But to gain trust, right, you have to give trust. You got to. And so many times we sit in this defensive posture thinking to ourselves, well, I'll just see. But no. Trust, you got to give it away for someone to give you trust. Another one of these values is loyalty. It's loyalty. Right? Loyalty says that no matter what happens in our relationship, I know you're going to be with me. No matter what happens in our relationship, I know that you're for me. No matter what happens in our relationship, even if it gets kind of rocky, that you're not going to run away from me, that you're going to stick beside me. I mean, there's something about loyalty. Again, whether it's dating, marriage, parenting, coach, teacher, knowing that you're with me and you're for me. I mean, loyalty is just one of those values that we attach to all of our relationships. Another one is expectations. And these expectations, some of them are fair, some of them not fair. Some of them are spoken, some of them are just assumed. Some of those expectations are realistic and some of those are unrealistic. And we attach expectations to every one of our relationships. For some of you, if you're newer to Tri-County Church and in a church style like Tri-County Church right now, you have expectations attached to me because guess what? I wear this label pastor, and every once in a while, someone might attach that lead pastor or senior pastor to me. And you have expectations, depending on how you grew up, depending on what type of denomination that you grew up attending. Maybe it was a denomination you attended last week. And now you're walking in and you're looking at me like, well, I guess that guy's a pastor. And guess one of those expectations you have right now? And this expectation is kind of rocking your world because you're looking at me and you're saying to yourself, well, I didn't think a pastor could dress like that. Is that true? And some of you are like, shouldn't he be in a robe or shouldn't he be in a suit and tie? Expectations. And here's the thing about our expectations and our trust and our loyalty. When we think about these things, I mean, they're always in motion. And whether we want to admit it or not, we're applying these to every single relationship we have. And in this moment, I thought about wowing all of you with my juggling skills, but I decided not to, for obvious reasons. But these values that are in motion are also extremely fragile, aren't they? I mean, you think about trust. Again, to gain trust, you have to give trust. And here's the thing. As soon as you give trust, fractures, doesn't it? And then you think about loyalty, right? Same thing with loyalty is like trust, right? As to gain loyalty, you have to give loyalty. And so as soon as you, give away, now you have crushed loyalty. Then you think about expectations. Again, there's many expectations that we place on all of our relationships. And guess what? Those people don't even know we're placing those expectations there, do they? And then they don't meet them. And now you have shattered expectations. But here's the interesting side. As soon as one person fractures your trust, as soon as one person crushes your loyalty, as soon as one person shatters your expectations, that mess doesn't just get on that person. What happens with this mess? It gets on every relationship, doesn't it? Now you're questioning everyone's trust. You're questioning everyone's loyalty. You're questioning every expectation. Now that mess sprays on everyone. There's a classic nursery rhyme that we all know. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. And the 1950s version that we all can recite goes like this. It goes, all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. But I like the original version from 1797. I mean, the first two lines are the same, but then it changes. It says, 80 men and 80 more could not make Humpty Dumpty where he was before. And we all look back and we think about who we were before until that person fractured our trust. We think back to before that person crushed our loyalty. We think back to before when that person then shattered our expectations. And here's reality. We can't go back to like we were before. And that's why hurt people. And this happens all the time. Why? Because as soon as one person hurts you, as soon as one person fractures your trust, crushes your loyalty, shatters your expectations, as soon as one person does that, guess what happens? That hurt gets sprayed on every other relationship, and we all do it. You're not an exemption. I'm not either. Because hurt people unless. And that's where we're going today. One of the first things Jesus did when he stepped into his public ministry as an adult, he gathered a circle of people together. And that circle of people spent 3 years together, but in that 3-year time period, I mean, it was like 20 years of life jammed into 3 years. I mean, it was this 3-year leadership intensive, emotionally charged, spiritually confusing, but life-altering 3-year period of time. And Jesus intentionally created this circle. And one night, this circle was sitting around eating dinner together. And there's something, some 2,000 years later, that we all get about having a meal together, don't we? I mean, whether you're best friends with a person or it's the first time getting to know someone, there's something connecting about a meal, isn't there? There's something emotionally engaging about having a meal together. There's something that happens relationally when we sit down and have a meal with someone. In this circle that had spent some 3 years together, we're sitting around having dinner together. And after dinner, Jesus looked at the circle and said, all of you, on account of me, will fall away. You talk about a mood shifter. You talk about a downer moment, right? It was like, oh, dinner was great. And then Jesus just leans into him and says, no, all of you will fall away. All of you will go hide. All of you will betray me. All of you will fracture trust. All of you will crush loyalty. All of you will shatter expectations. All of you. And Peter, I love Peter because he's that guy that all the time, moment after moment after moment, whether action or with words, he was always first. And him being always first always got him into trouble. And this was like no other. And Peter looks at Jesus and said, hey, Jesus, yeah, all of them might fall away, but I will never. Jesus, every other person in the circle, that they will fall away, but I will never. Hey, Jesus, everyone that you've healed, everyone you've touched, everyone that you just had a significant moment with, they might fall away, but I will never fall away. Jesus, James, your brother, he will, I won't. And Jesus, all includes your mom. Your mom will, but I won't. I will never. Jesus, you could just picture him kind of turning, facing Peter, looking him in the eyes and said, hey, Peter, before this night is over, the rooster will crow, and you will disown me not once, not twice, but 3 times. But Peter just volleys right back at Jesus and said, hey, Jesus, even if I have to die, I will never disown you. Never. Well, they made their way to the Garden of Gethsemane, and the soldiers came, and they arrest Jesus. Peter pulls out a sword, cuts off a soldier's ear, which is a really cool moment. And they take Jesus to put him on trial. And Peter followed at a distance. Now, he was there, give him credit, but he was at a distance. He was safe. I mean, he was still seeing Jesus, but he wanted to kind of blend in. And it says when some there had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat down with them. And just put yourself in Peter's shoes for a moment. I mean, he didn't expect this plot twist to happen. He didn't expect all of this to unfold. And he had to be wondering to himself, like how is Jesus going to get himself out of this situation? How is Jesus going to do a miracle or sneak out? Or what's going to happen now? And he sits down around this fire with this group of people, and his mind had to be racing. His emotions had to be raging. And then all of a sudden, this little servant girl walks up to him and says, hey, aren't you the one with Jesus? But she didn't stop there with Jesus, because Jesus was a common name, like Chris is a common name now. 2,000 years ago, Jesus was a common name. No, she just didn't say Jesus. She goes, aren't you the one who was with Jesus of Galilee, Jesus of Nazareth? I mean, now she narrowed it down. And Peter said, nope, not me. Someone else walked up to him and said, hey, aren't you one of them? One of them who was with Jesus. Peter says, no, not me. And then John's gospel, the story about Jesus, John gives us such a descriptive picture of this third moment. He tells us that there's a servant of the high priest who walked up to Peter and said, hey, Peter, the soldier whose ear you cut off was a relative of mine. And oh, by the way, I was there. I saw you cut off his ear. You were with Jesus. And Peter goes, I don't know the man. And Peter called down an oath saying, as God is my witness, with all these other witnesses, I am not one of them. Then the rooster crowed. And Jesus turned and looked right at Peter. And all of a sudden the conversation, just hours old, came rushing back to Peter. And he ran out and wept bitterly. Put yourself for a moment in Jesus' shoes. I mean, not like Jesus, the Son of God shoes, just Jesus as a person for a moment. And if Peter was your friend, how would you respond in that moment? What would you feel like when you turned and looked and saw your friend knowing what he had just done? Not once, not twice, 3 times, right? Maybe a better question is, how have you responded? When someone has fractured your trust, when someone has crushed your loyalty, when someone has shattered your expectations. How have you responded? When someone you were dating, said all the right words to you, and just hours later, you're like, did you believe any of that? For some of you, you left church because the pastor or the choir director or a small group, life group leader or the youth leader, or just someone in the lobby. A church person, a religious person, a Christian. They fractured your trust or crushed your loyalty or shattered your expectations. And you just walked away from church because you're just like forget that. I thought church was supposed to be different than out there. And right now, you're walking, maybe for the first time in years, and you're walking back in. And guess what? You're looking around going, who's going to fracture my trust? Who's going to crush my loyalty? Who's going to shatter my expectations? Maybe for you as a business partner. You great friends. You went into business together, and the next thing you know it, that person was splitting off from you, taking all of your clientele, and all of that trust, and all of that loyalty, all of those expectations. Obliterated. See, every person to ever live has at least one reason why living a life isolated and alone is better than living life together. And that every person includes Jesus. But what I find so amazing about that, Jesus, knowing everything that was going to happen, I mean, he called it out. I mean, hours before, he's looking at Peter saying, Peter, you're going to make a mess of this relationship. Jesus still chose to gather a circle. Still chose to gather a circle. Knowing that those in the circle were going to fracture his trust. Knowing those in the circle were going to crush loyalty. Knowing those in the circle, well, they weren't so much going to shatter his expectations because Jesus was clear about what he knew they were going to do. But they had their own expectations. Because Peter wasn't the only one to say, I'll never disown you. The rest of them were around that circle that night after dinner. Guess what they said? Oh yeah, me too. Me too, Jesus. Jesus was crucified. He was put into a tomb. He conquered the tomb. After they showed up and the tomb was empty, Jesus, over the period of days and weeks, started to appear to individuals and appear to small groups of people. And several weeks later, the disciples had just kind of gone back to what was normal for their lives. They had gone back to what made them feel secure. They had gone back to what they had known for years and years and years. And a group of them were back on the Sea of Galilee fishing. Why? Because they were fishermen, and that's what they knew. That's what gave them security. That's what that kind of gave them some purpose in life. And so they were back on the lake fishing, and all of a sudden they looked across on the shore, and they saw this silhouette, this guy, and all of a sudden one of them was like, hey, that's Jesus. And guess what Peter does? Again, there's this pattern. Peter jumps out of the boat, swims to shore. Can you imagine that? While the rest of them had to try to get the boat back to shore. And when they got to shore, Jesus was doing what we'd expect the risen Son of God to be doing. He was cooking breakfast. And they sat in a circle. They ate breakfast together. And after breakfast, Jesus said to Peter, Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And we're not sure exactly what he was referring to when he said these. Maybe it was the other disciples around the circle. Maybe it was the fish. They actually have a count in the Bible. They caught 153 fish, which I just love that little detail is there. It's like, well, that's a good day's catch. Maybe these refers to the boat and the nets, their livelihood. We're not sure, but that's not the point of what Jesus is getting at. He wants to know, hey, do you love me? And Peter responds, he goes, yes. He said, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said, take care of my sheep. And the third time, he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And here's what I love about this next moment. John is writing this story down years after it took place. But oh, by the way, John was in the boat when Jesus showed up on the shore. John had to get the boat back to shore because Peter jumped out of the boat. John sat around that circle. They ate the breakfast Jesus made for him. John's an eyewitness. So years later, he's thinking about this moment, and he's writing down this story that he lived out. And then all of a sudden, Jesus, for the third time, looks at Peter and says, do you love me? And John gives us this insight. He goes, Peter was hurt. John could see it in his body language. John could see it in Peter's eyes, right? When someone is hurt deep, like we can tell. And John's like, hey, I'm sitting there. I'm looking at this interaction between Jesus and Peter. When Jesus asked Peter a third time, like I could see it all over Peter. He was hurt because Jesus had asked him a third time, do you love me? And then Peter responds, Lord, you know all things. Oh, what a response. Think about Peter at this moment. Peter's looking at Jesus saying, Jesus, you called it out. You said I'd disown you, not once, not twice, 3 times. You even got the rooster right. You know all things. Peter's looking at Jesus and saying, Jesus, that moment in the courtyard when the rooster crows and you turned and you looked, I'm never going to forget that moment. You know all things. And Jesus, you know what's in my heart. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. I think about these interactions. You know, the first one that kind of kicked this thing all off was a meal. It was dinner time around a circle. And now we're at another meal, breakfast, but around a circle. I think about Peter, who walked from a distance, came into the courtyard. They had made a fire where he sat. He saw Jesus. And now they sit around a fire that Jesus made. I think about the 3 times that Peter said, not me, not me, not me. Don't know him, don't know him, don't know him. And now Jesus 3 times says, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? If we would write the story, we would flip the script around. If we were writing the story, we would expect Peter to walk up to Jesus and say, what? Do you love me? Right? Because Jesus is the one that was hurt. I mean, Jesus was the one where trust was fractured, where loyalty was crushed, right? Jesus was the one hurt in this scenario. And if we would write the story, we'd flip the script because Peter should go to Jesus and say, hey, Jesus, I'm sorry, but do you love me? I mean, I hurt you. I hope you love me. But Jesus is painting such a vastly different picture. Jesus is coming to Peter and saying, hey, Peter, I love you. I want to make sure that you love me. Hey, Peter, I want to make sure your guilt doesn't blind you from the fact that I still love you. Peter, I want to make sure that the trust you fractured doesn't separate out from the love I'm extending to you. Peter, I want to make sure that you know that the things you just did has no bearing on the love I have for you. You see, hurt people unless hurt people choose to extend love. And when hurt people choose to extend love, then hurt people heal. And I think that was a point of Jesus looking at Peter, saying, Peter, I love you, even though you hurt me. And I think it was Jesus looking at the rest of them around the circle saying, hey, you guys are going to go be the church, the movement, the church that's going to change the world. Guess what? There's going to be a whole lot of messy people that's going to fracture your trust. There's a whole lot of messy people that's going to crush your loyalty. There's going to be a whole lot of messy people that's going to shatter your expectations, and you are going to be hurt. So extend love. Extend love. Now, if you're a Christ follower, you know who you are, just me saying that. If you're not sure, then you can tune me out. But if you're a Christ follower, like you're like, yeah, I'm a Christ follower. I want you to tune back in because some of you tuned me out as soon as you knew where I was going because you've heard this story before. Like VBS, you remember the flannel graph, or maybe it was Awanas, right? You're like, oh, I came to church hoping I'd hear a different story. I know this story. Some of you were thinking, I could teach this better than Chris, which is cool. You're more than welcome to. Some of you were thinking to yourself, as I'm going through, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? You're literally thinking to yourself, like, oh, why isn't Chris talking about the Greek wordplay around the word love? If you want to know that answer, ask me afterwards. There's a real good reason why. But if that's you, if you're a Christian, just tune back in for a moment. You see, Christians can talk about the love of Jesus with spectacular eloquence and live it out with passionate unwillingness. So easy to quote verses and talk about the love of Jesus, but be so passionate in your unwillingness to extend love to people who have hurt you. And it happens in churches every day. Well, that person talked about me, and that person said they were going to, and that person, I had this expectation for, and they didn't meet it, and that person was gossiping, and that person, and that person, and that person. And we, as Christians, can so eloquently talk about the love of Jesus, but so passionately be unwilling to live it out. And we wonder why people walk out of churches. People don't need to hear us talk about it. They need to see us living it out. Hey, Christ followers, you gotta extend love to the people that hurt you. Because here's the thing we have to grasp. Is that the heartbeat of the story. The deeper you grasp Jesus' love for you, the further you will extend that love to those who hurt you. I mean, think about if you're Peter sitting there, knowing what you have done. This is just several weeks old. It's not years later where that wound had healed. I mean, this wound was wide open. Peter knew what he did. And oh, by the way, everyone else knew what Peter had done too. Don't you think people talked about that? And Jesus is like, no, Peter, but I love you. And the complete mess that you just made, I still love you. And Jesus is like, hey, Peter, you got to understand. There's nothing you can do for that love not to be extended to you. And the more that Peter grasped the love Jesus had for him, guess what Jesus knew? The more he would extend that love to every other messy person he would come in contact with. I'm just telling you, the more you grasp Jesus' love for you, because of the fractured trust, because of the shattered expectations, because of the crushed loyalty that you've done, the more you realize that Jesus goes, no, but I love you. I'm telling you. The further you'll extend that love to those who have hurt you. Because hurt people. Unless hurt people choose to extend love. And when hurt people choose not to hurt people, but to extend love, then hurt people heal. And hurt people heal. You see, Jesus, if he had it all to do over again, he would still gather a circle, even though that circle was going to be a complete mess. It's why for you, to get into a circle is so important. We've been talking about it. Take a step from a row, or maybe watching online by yourself, and take a step into a circle. Last weekend, across all of our campuses, we had 224 people who chose to take a step out of a row into a circle, into a life group. And it was just like, we just celebrated all week. All week we've celebrated the fact that 224 people said, you know what, I'm going to take a step in. Last weekend after one of the services, I was in a conversation with someone. And so I'm talking with this person, and all of a sudden, just within earshot of me, there was two people having a side conversation. And I was trying so hard to be really focused on this conversation, and I was mostly. But the conversation happening within earshot, like, it just kind of dragged me in a little bit, because these two people were just having a very authentic conversation. And went something like this. Hey, well, do you want to? I don't know, do you? Well, I'm fine with it. It's up to you. Well, I'm okay with it if you're okay with it. Well, I don't know. And I'm just sitting there smiling the whole time, right? Because there's this little fear going, I know I probably should, and that pastor guy on stage, I mean, he's encouraging us to take a step into a circle of life group, and maybe we should, but I don't know. Throughout the week, as stories were rolling in from all of our campuses, there was one word that we kept on hearing over and over again. And this word, I love this word, by the way, was awkward. People were like, yeah, it's kind of awkward, isn't it? Like, you go from not knowing a lot of people, and all of a sudden you walk into a hallway or into a meeting gathering area, and there's people helping you get into a circle, get into a relationship. That's kind of awkward. Isn't that awkward? And maybe you felt that. You're like, yeah, that's awkward. It's like speed dating, but at church. That's just weird. But here's the thing with awkward moments. We as people understand awkward moments, don't we? Have you ever been on a first date with someone? Isn't that awkward? I mean, some of you are sitting by your first date some 40 years later, so really think back. But right, a first date is always awkward. My first date with my wife, it was awkward. It was like, hi, I know your first name. I think that's all. You try to come up with conversation. Quickly move from the restaurant to a movie so you don't have to come up with conversation, right? It's awkward. You go to a new job. You walk in for the very first day. Isn't that awkward? Right? You're like, you're walking around. You see people, and they kind of look at you. They might say hi. They might not say hi. They might smile at you. They might stare at you. Right? It's awkward. The first day on the job is awkward. You know, you're helping your little second grader get into soccer, and you show up, and you're trying to meet the coach, and you don't know the coach, and there's other parents there, and there's that awkward, like, parent with child stand around moment. Here's the thing. Every new relational circle we step into is awkward. This is no different. It's no different. It might feel different because it's church and we have different expectations attached to church than a soccer team or a basketball team, right? But it's still awkward. Just embrace the awkwardness. I get that. I get it. But here's what Jesus knew. It's why Jesus modeled this. Life change happens in a circle. It just does. Life change happens around dinner and breakfast. Life change happens when all of a sudden someone looks at you and says, like, you know what? I want to encourage you. I want to help you. I want to pray for you. You're going through a hard time in life. I'm there with you. And here's the thing we got to embrace. Every single person around that circle, around that life group, I'm just telling you, is messy. So maybe lower your expectations a little bit and just realize that your mess from other relationships are getting on current relationships, and other people's mess from other relationships are getting on you. But together, as we help each other understand Jesus' love for us, then we encourage all of us to extend love to others. And when that happens, hurt people begin to heal. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for our time together. And you know the number of hurting people across our campuses online. You know the trust that's been fractured. You know the expectations that's been shattered. You know the loyalty that's just been crushed. You know the mess that has just been sprayed all over our relationships. And Lord, I'm thankful that you modeled for us with Peter that your love is unending, that your love, no matter what we have done to you, is extended to us, that your love, no matter what, covers us. And Lord, I pray that we all will extend that love to those who have hurt us the most. In your name I pray. Amen.